Alrighty, so I've just got off work, and despite the fact that I'm incredibly tired, I have to do this News of the Week episode right now because if I'm not going to do it tonight, I'm not going to get a chance to do it until Christmas Day. I mean, I know these next 2 days I'm going to be relatively busy again. Tomorrow I'm going to be once again working overtime from 10 a.m. to 7:30, and I believe on Friday it's almost the same time, except I'm going to be coming into the store from 11 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. And I know after that shift, I am just going to be completely done. Like, I've been working, 45 hours this week, and I'm just mentally exhausted with the way that it's been so busy at the place that I've been working on. But the good news is, at least I have Christmas Day off, and then the day after, which, if you're Canadian, that is known as Boxing Day. So I do have time to make up in terms of those days, making some video and talk about not only moving forward series video and talk about other teams in the moving forward series episode, but also talk about some of the other video that is not related to that. But the other thing that I also want to say is that I should have done a News of the Week video on Saturday, and because I didn't do one, that means now I'm going to do a relatively long News of the Week episode today, and it's almost like a combination of some of the news and some of the free agency signing that happened in the past couple of days, which, by the way, this board alone, basically, except for this one news I'll talk about, contract extension, it's basically designed with free agency. Like, there was a ton of free agency signing that has happened in the last couple of days, and then not to mention the next board, it's going to be some of the transfer rumors and signings that has happened besides free agency that has happened. So, with that being said, let us actually begin, and let us first talk about the first of what would be, I think, 9 players that will sign off of free agency. I'm pretty sure I might have missed some, but these are the 9 players that I've heard from the MLS website that have been signing with a new team off of free agency. And we start off with Omar Gonzalez signing with the New England Revolution off of free agency. So this seems like it's a Bruce Arena guy going to New England and joining his former boss. And I know there's no doubt that Omar Gonzalez, once he does go to the Revs, I don't think he's going to be a starter for the team. I mean, I'll be shocked if he's going to be a starter in that back line for the Revs, because that Revs backline is already very, very solid, and Omar Gonzalez probably will be second or third in the depth chart. But knowing the fact that I think this is just a signing because of the way that this is a Bruce Arena guy, and also maybe he can get some veteran presence in the locker room, it makes perfect sense, the fact that they decide to sign him. And I'm pretty sure TFC fans are going to be happy the fact that the team eventually took him. I mean, albeit they didn't really earn any money out of it, but I know a lot of TFC fans were very frustrated with how Omar Gonzalez played, especially last season, where he was part of one of the main issue why this TFC back line gave up one of the most goals conceded last season in the Eastern Conference. And it's also happy to say that they kind of got an upgrade in terms of free agency to replace Omar Gonzalez. And that player is Shane O'Neill, who was signed off of free agency from the Seattle Sounders. I was kind of surprised the Sounders decided to not re-sign Shane O'Neill, because I think during his time in that Sounders backline, whenever he needs to cover with some of the injuries to that backline for the Sounders, he was really solid. And I think TFC definitely got a big upgrade in terms of that. And like I said, I think their fans will be happy. Be the fact that, we can get rid of Omar Gonzalez and get Shane O'Neill just off of free agency. We'll definitely take that every time of the day. Now, Austin FC have signed Ethan Finley off of free agency. First of all, I wish Ethan Finley the best at Austin FC, because I know during his time with Minnesota he was well loved from the fans, and I'm definitely going to miss him. I mean, he's not known as one of the best players in this team, and a guy that has a incredible quality to really change the game, but he's also kind of a hard-working player, and that there's times where if you are able to set him up in a good position to score, most of the time he's going to bury that into the back of net. And I also understand why the Loons decided to not re-sign Ethan Finley, knowing the fact that he wasn't getting as much minute. It seems like his career, when you look at his age, it started to get to that point where his career started to head to a decline. But nevertheless, for Austin FC, they got a very good player that can still do it if you are able to provide him service, and you know that he's also going to be a very hard working player once you of course bring him off the bench. So nevertheless, I think it's a decent signing for Austin FC. But now moving on to their interstate rival, the Houston Dynamo, who have signed Steve Clark off a free agency. Now, this was also a big surprise, the fact that the Timbers decided to not re-sign Steve Clark. I mean, I understand. I think one of the things that Steve Clark has not done well with the Portland Timbers is that he's not really a guy that you should be trust on when it's the biggest occasion. I mean, we saw it in MLS Cup where he committed that howler that, even though that wasn't turns out to be the winning goal of the game, I mean, that's one that, in the biggest game possible, you should not be committing that. And it's also not the first time we've seen the fact that Steve Clark kind of struggle in these big games or so. I mean, he is still a decent goalkeeper. I think he's still an above average goalkeeper, even though he is getting up to that age. And, for the Dynamo, I think this season, there's always that talk of the fact that, are they going to maybe have both Maric and Nelson kind of battle out for that goalkeeping position? Well, the answer now seems like maybe that's not going to be the case, because it seems like maybe Steve Clark is going to be coming in there, and I really think they got a decent set out of this. And that, I talk about how they should be a team that maybe head into this rebuild, but at least they kind of are able to still get some good stopgap kind of player. And that, with Steve Clark, I think he is going to be a guy that even with a Dynamo defense that is not very good, he's going to be a guy that is, I won't be surprised there's going to be times that he's going to single-handedly bail out this Dynamo defense and make some incredible save. Just make sure you don't put him in big game situation where that's when, as I mentioned, he usually crumbles. Now, Oriol Rosell, remember him from his day with Sporting KC, and he was part of that MLS Cup winning team back in 2013. Well, he's back. He is going to be going back to Sporting KC as a free agency. Now, there's no doubt that he is going to be a player that's not going to get a lot of minutes for SKC, because his career ever since he left for SKC to go to Orlando City has kind of head down in a downward spiral. But it's no doubt that this is kind of just a signing for the nostalgia of getting a player that, I'm pretty sure a lot of SKC fans, especially some of the ones that's been a fan of this team when this team won MLS Cup just 8 years ago, how Oriol Rosell was such a great player for his team. And I thought when he was signed with Orlando City was going to get a very decent player in the midfield, and it didn't quite turn that way. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he actually suffered a devastating injury during his time with Orlando City, and ever since that he suffered that devastating injury, he just never looked the same. And again, even though he's going to be going back to SKC, I don't think he's going to be as an important player as we saw a couple of years ago in his first stint with the team. Now, Sporting KC also signed Ben Sweat to a 2-year contract off of free agency, and Ben Sweat, another guy that kind of like Oriol Rosell, a guy that used to be very decent in MLS. I mean, I remember during his day with NYCFC, there was time where he was considered one of the best fullback in the league, and then he went to Inter Miami, and I've talked about how I thought that was a great signing for Inter Miami, getting one of the best fullbacks in the league, and it just never worked out. And again, just like Oriol Rosell, he has suffered a lot of injuries during his time with Inter Miami, and those injuries has really kind of crippled his career. And then eventually he went to Austin, where he didn't really feature for that team a lot. And it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if he's going to get a chance. I mean, I'm assuming with Martin still with SKC, and I think this is just kind of a move where, in case if Martins is going to go down with injuries, Ben Sweat could be a perfect replacement for that. But it's kind of interesting they decided to basically replace a guy that is injury prone with a guy that also is injury prone. I mean, I'm not sure if that's a great idea, but we'll see how it's going to work out. Now, the Chicago Fire have signed goalkeeper Spencer Richie off of free agency from the Seattle Sounders, and this season for the Fire, knowing the fact that they have blow up the whole team. I didn't think one of their signing, especially off of free agency, was a goalkeeper. Especially, I think they have a good, decent goalkeeper, an uprising goalkeeper in Gasolina in their reign. Though I think it's going to be interesting to see, heading into this season, who's going to win that main spot. I mean, I feel like the youngster Selena is going to win that spot. Though Richie has had some good MLS experience, and even though he hasn't been featured a lot with the Seattle Sounders, he could be a guy that maybe could step into this Fire team and maybe could even be the starting goalkeeper heading into the first game of the season. Now, speaking of goalkeeper, FC Cincinnati have signed former Atlanta United goalkeeper Alex Kahn, and this is another guy that I think he's going to maybe have some competition of both Vermeer and also Teton in terms of the goalkeeping spot. I mean, goalkeeping was a big issue for this FC Cincinnati team. I mean, from the disaster that is Kenneth Vermeer to the inconsistency of Shimi Teton, they're hoping that Alex Kahn is going to be the guy. And actually, it's not Alex Kahn, it's Alec Kahn that is. I made a bit of a mistake in terms of his first name there. But he's also a guy that's been the backup for Brad Guzan for a while and hasn't really been playing for this Atlanta team. But we've seen it before, where even though when a goalkeeper that is back up with a good team and they finally get a chance to be a starter, they can sometimes turns out to be great. I mean, we've seen it before. Guys like Brad Stuver being a long-time backup for John Johnson at NYCFC, goes to Austin and done very well. And then I would also never forget about Tyler Miller, of him being a long-time backup of Stephen Fry, go to LAFC, and now with Minnesota being a decent goalkeeper. And maybe FC Cincinnati has finally trying to use that as a formula and hope that maybe Alec Kahn is going to be the next big goalkeeper that has been a long-time backup, but once he is finally get a chance, he's definitely going to make the most out of his chance and be a decent goalkeeper in this league. And then moving on in terms of the next news about Charlotte FC, who they were very active once again this week. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise because after the expansion draft, Charlotte has already started working on trying to build their squad. And one of the players that they signed off of free agency is Jordy Raynham, and they also signed Harrison Offal off of free agency. Now, Jordy Raynham is a guy that I thought he had a decent season last year with DC United, and it seems like whatever Hernan Losada has done with the system has really benefited Jordy Raynham, because there was time where he looked like the old Jordy Raynham that we remember during his days with the Vancouver Whitecaps, where he was just such an elite full attacker for that Whitecaps team. Now, I'm not quite sure if that's going to be the same effect that now he's going to be going to Charlotte FC. The one player that I know is definitely going to make an impact out of these two players that I mentioned that Charlotte have signed off free agency is Harrison Offal. He has been just considered one of the best fullbacks in the league for a very long time, a veteran present that done very well for the Columbus Crew. And even though his age has started to kind of get up a little bit, I mean, we've seen this before with expansion teams decide to sign a veteran present in the back line, and it seems like this is going to be the case again with Charlotte FC signing a veteran fullback that I think he still has the legs to be very well in this league. But with that being said, now moving on into the last news that I talked about. All the news on this board is free agency, but there is one news that isn't related to free agency, but instead it's contract extension. And you know the drill by now. Whenever there is a week where there's a lot of contract extension that has happened, I'm not going to just mention it one by one and just kind of mention all these players that got contract extensions to kind of save some time of what is already could be a very long video in this news of the week. So guys that got contract extension this week is Paul Marie, Jared Trout, Darvin Quintero, Nikasi Tafari, and Maurizio Pereira receiving contract extension for their respective team. And as I always say, I think most of these guys deserve their contract extension. I mean, I think maybe the only guy that I'm kind of a little bit surprised that got the contract extension and maybe is a player that probably could have gone into the free agency market is Darvin Quintero. I mean, I think last year we definitely saw that Quintero is started to head through a bit of a decline, and that I guess when I look at the contract extension that he received with the Houston Dynamo, it's not really a DP contract and a contract that takes a lot of that cap space that the Houston Dynamo has, and plus he could, if he can maybe show a little bit of that form that he had with Minnesota, he can still be a decent player, but still, you also look at his age, he's really heading up to that, so yeah, I'm kind of surprised a little bit they decided to re-sign him, but also if they re-sign him just on a small TAM contract, that maybe isn't the worst thing for this Dynamo team. But that being said, I am now going to switch boards and look at the other transfer rumors and signings that has happened in this past week in MLS. So now moving on to some of the transfer rumors, signings, and trades that happened in the past week in MLS. And we once again go back to Charlotte FC, who have signed Ecuadorian midfielder Alan Franco from Atletico Mineiro. Now, obviously, I'm pretty sure when Atlanta United fans first saw this, they probably feel very frustrated that it seems like the expansion team once again have took one of their player, and that it seems like they just lost their one of their main defender, Alan Franco, to Charlotte FC. But it turns out that the good news is it's not the Alan Franco that they think of, but instead it's the Alan Franco that is an Ecuadorian midfielder that plays for Atletico Mineiro. Though I will say that this is kind of a player that I think this was a guy that Charlotte FC signed because he was a player that formerly played under Miguel Angel Ramirez, and we've seen it before where whenever a head coach come into MLS, and especially a new head coach coming into MLS, you usually see them getting some former player that they use to coach coach them under their former team, and this seems like it's the case again. But nevertheless, we'll see how he's going to do. I mean, he's definitely a player that I don't think he's going to be the main number 10 for this team, knowing the fact that from what I heard during his time with Atletico Mineiro, he was more kind of a box-to-box kind of midfielder and kind of more like a number 6 player. So, for Charlotte fans that maybe get a little bit excited that they have find their future number 10 when they heard this news, not really. Though they have maybe find a good midfielder that will definitely do the dirty work and solidify that midfield positions with that player, and we'll see if that, of course, is going to be the case. Now, Atlanta United did trade one of their players, though it's one the player that is more in their lower part of the depth chart, and that player is Mo Adams, as he is traded to Inter Miami in exchange for goalkeeper Dylan Castillejo. I think that's how you pronounce. Now, this one is kind of a little bit of a strange deal, knowing the fact that what they got back was just a goalkeeper that is only 17 years old, and there's really not much to know about whether or not if he has some good potential. But that being said, I think if we've seen before where even with young goalkeepers that maybe you have never heard of, and if Atlanta is able to develop him in a right way, and we know Atlanta has a good history of developing good young talent, maybe we could hear his name down the line, and that he could be a guy that can do well in MLS. But that being said, go on the other end with Inter Miami getting Mo Adams. I mean, Inter Miami, they have been getting some pieces within the league, though. As I said, I feel like this is kind of something that they're kind of almost forced to have to make, with the way that as much as they really want to kind of blow up their current core that they built in their first 2 seasons, they simply can't, because a lot of those players are kind of under contract for next season, and they're kind of in this cap hell where they don't really have a lot of cap space, and the only way that maybe they can try to improve the team is trying to get these players that maybe are going to be players that could do well if they have a change of scenery, but it's also players that is not really kind of like an impact player. So we'll see whether or not if Mo Adams, with a change of scenery with Inter Miami, and I also remember when Mo Adams was with the Chicago Fire, he was a decent player, and when he went to Atlanta, I thought it was maybe his next best jump in his career to be able to play a team that is successful, and no, it turns out he didn't really feature with this team a lot, and now let's see if he maybe gets a chance with this Inter Miami team that has already feel like next season they're going to once again go with the main core, and that if that's the case, then I have a feeling Mo Adams would just be a player that kind of find himself in the same situation where he was with Atlanta United, mostly on the bench for the majority of next season. Now, the New York Red Bulls have signed Dylan Nilas from Nashville SC, and this also means that we once again have another brothers duo within an MLS team. I mean, I always love to see when an MLS team have two brothers playing with the same team. I mean, we saw it with the Rodon brothers in Seattle. We saw it with the Char brothers in Portland, and then recently we have seen the Higuain brothers down in Inter Miami. Though obviously Federico Higuain is no longer there, but at least now we get another brother duo in Dylan Nilas and Sean Nilas with the New York Red Bulls, and I can't wait to see when both of those guys will be on the playing field together, because there's just something about when two brothers play on the same team that I just love to see that happen. So yeah, we'll see if that, of course, is going to happen. And again, Dylan Nilas, like his brother Sean Nilas, I'm kind of surprised he did not come out of the Red Bull system. Like, when I first thought that he was signed with Inter Miami, he looked like he was coming out of the Red Bull system. Though I could be wrong. I think he did come out of the Red Bull system, and then Inter Miami, of course, picked him up in the expansion draft. But nevertheless, he gets to go back to the Red Bull system that he started in his career, and now get to reunite it with his brother. And again, hopefully we might see both the Nilas brother playing at the same time. And if that's going to be the case, and if there is a situation where both brothers get on the score sheet and on the assist chart, yeah, I'm just going to be very happy when that happens. Now, Walker Zimmerman is reported to attract some interest with numerous English clubs, and this is not a big surprise considering that Walker Zimmerman has had two really stellar years with Nashville SC, and he's also been a player that, even going back to this FC Dallas day, that I thought he was not only going to be the next best thing in MLS, but he could maybe be another player that could be an uprising U.S. men's national team player, and maybe a guy that could make the jump to Europe. Now, obviously, it still hasn't happened yet as his career progresses, but this could be the closest that it could happen. And if there is going to be some English club that is going to be interested in him, I mean, I'm assuming, from what I heard, it looked like one of those teams is West Ham, potentially getting him from Nashville, or maybe some of those English clubs. But if I'm Walker Zimmerman, I would take it. I mean, he has had a stellar career in MLS, but now is kind of the time for him to, if he wants to solidify that U.S. men's national team spot, and especially in the center back role, you just feel like he has to make that jump to Europe and challenge himself with playing with a European team. And we'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case. And if it is going to be the case, I expect like he could maybe be the most expensive defender import that we have ever seen in MLS history, because I know in MLS, in terms of all these imports that we have done, and all these high talented players that have sold off to Europe, most of them are attacking players. You usually do not see a lot of defender that turns out to be very well in MLS and move on to Europe for a big sum of money. But with Walker Zimmerman, he might be the first one, and if he is going to be the first one, I won't be surprised he's going to be the last one too, because we also have a lot of defenders in this league. And that, I know the other thing that maybe some people criticize MLS is that they do well in terms of developing attacking talent, but they don't do a good job in terms of developing defenders in this league. That is a complete myth, and that you can definitely see that there is a lot of good talented young defenders within MLS, and that those players, I think, will eventually do get sell off to Europe. But in some cases, there's always need a beginning for that to happen. And let's see if Walker Zimmerman is going to be that pioneer of these MLS defenders, finally get those big money moves to go to Europe. Now, the Colorado Rapids is close to signing Brazilian attacking midfielder Max Alves from Flamengo. Now, this is a signing that originally I thought maybe this is kind of their answer of either finding that number 10 that they they really want to make him a DP player. I mean, I know they still have Jonas Namli as their main DP number 10, but looking at how he played last year with the Colorado Rapids, you just kind of feel like maybe Jonas Namli is not the answer for the future of this Rapids team in that crucial number 10 position. Now they decided to maybe get this guy, and we'll see whether or not if they're going to make him a DP. I mean, if he is going to be a DP player, I think he's going to be a young DP because he's only 20 years old and he hasn't really made a lot of appearance with Flamengo. I mean, I think it was like 15 appearances that he has made during his young career. So there's a lot of question of whether or not if he is going to be decent, but nevertheless, you can definitely tell the Rapids are desperate in terms of trying to find that keystone in that number 10 position. And I've said it before, that's kind of the missing piece for this team. I mean, they have a lot of hard-working player on this team, but I just feel like they just need that one-star player, and especially in that number 10 position. And, again, they tried to find that with Jonas nominally, but he turns out to not be the answer, and it's unsurprising that they're looking to try to get another number 10. And again, we'll see whether or not if Max Hatlis, if he is going to be signed with the Rapids, will be that answer. And then finally, in terms of the last transfer report, Canadian international goalkeeper Milan Bojan is reported to be targeted by an unnamed MLS club. Now, I have a feeling that unnamed MLS club is most likely going to be a Canadian team, and that Canadian team could be Toronto FC. And the reason why I say that is because, Vancouver, obviously they have Maxime Crépeau, and I don't think they really need to get another Canadian international goalkeeper in that round. And then Montreal, even though they still kind of had that uncertainty in goalkeeper because they kind of rotate James Pantemes and Sebastian Brisa in that spot, I think both of those goalkeepers are decent, and that Montreal isn't really worried about that area of the field heading into next season, which kind of leads us to only one other Canadian team in MLS, that is Toronto FC. And it makes sense too, because this season, part of the reason why they had one of the worst goal allow rate that we saw this year isn't just because of the bad defense that they have. I mean, that bad defense kind of played part of it, but the goalkeeping was also a big part of it. I mean, neither Alex Bono and Quentin Westberg was very well did very well last season, and you can definitely see a sign that both of those goalkeepers probably are not the answer for this TFC team if they want to get themselves back to MLS Cup contenders. So the next best thing is, why not sign a Canadian international in Bojan, who has proven that he is definitely the real deal, and he can definitely be a decent goalkeeper, even though he isn't in his 30s. I mean, heck, he was just absolutely amazing in that CONCACAF World Cup qualifying game against Mexico, and it's not the first time he has been so well for this Canadian team in the World Cup qualifier. So for TFC, I think it's a no-brainer for them to sign him, but we'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case, or maybe some other team around the league that also have goalkeeping issue might even try to bid to try to sign Milan Bojan, who he currently played with Red Star Belgrade in Serbia right now. I mean, he obviously is a native Serbian. Well, actually, not native Serbia. I gotta be careful what I say there, because I'm pretty sure there's gonna be some people in the Baltics area, especially with the whole conflict going on in the 90s, that I don't want to get into that part of the field. But he is a guy that is from that region, that just turns out that I think he moved to Canada, and that's why he was eligible to play the team. But nevertheless, again, going back to this whole deal of him potentially come to MLS, I think that is a very good possibility, and if it is a possibility, it's most likely going to be TFC. Now, moving on into the next news, and this is a news that usually I talk about at first. I mean, anytime when there's some rumors of a head coach that is going to be hired by an MLS team, I usually talk about that first. But because of so many transfer reports and rumors that has happened, and also some of the free agency signing that has happened throughout this news of the week. I actually leave this to talk about some rumors of a head coach being hired by an MLS team in the latter part of the news of the week episode, and that head coach that is rumored to potentially come to MLS and be the next head coach of the Houston Dynamo is Jaime Lozano, who is a head coach that coached that Mexican Olympic team that was able to get to the Olympics in Tokyo, and also was famously able to beat the U.S. in one of those games to move on into the Olympics. Now, besides that, he was also a head coach with Querétaro, and I think he also did relatively well with that team, even promoted that team into the top tier of Mexican soccer. But he also is a guy that doesn't have any MLS experience, and we've seen before where just because you are able to get a decent Liga MX head coach, when they come to MLS, it doesn't usually work out very well. I mean, just as Diego Lozano, or not Diego Lozano, Diego Alonso and Mateus Almeida, how their life in MLS is. I mean, I know Almeida is still with the Quakes right now, but there is no doubt that Almeida, doing his time in MLS and what he's tried to replicate in terms of the tactics that he did with Chivas, it just hasn't worked out so far in MLS. And the same goes with Diego Alonso, who is considered probably the best head coach in Liga MX. He's when he came to Inter Miami, and it's still kind of shocked the fact that he only lasted a year, though it was also not surprised considering he just had no technical ability during that inaugural season, and he just kind of made an absolute mess and created an identity crisis to that Inter Miami team with all the formation that he's been using every single game. So yeah, I'm just kind of give the Dynamo just a bit of a warning that just because you try to go down to Liga MX to maybe find a promising head coach, it doesn't always work out that well. But we'll see whether or not if this rumor is true, because this is a relatively a new rumor that just happened today, and it will take time to see if there is going to be more truth, the fact that he is going to be indeed the next head coach of the Houston Dynamo. But now moving on into finally talk about the last news topic in this news of the week is the US Open Cup format has been officially announced today. Now, obviously, they haven't announced what the matchup is going to be in the first round proper of this year's US Open Cup. That actually is not going to announce until mid-January. But from what we know right now is that now the format is going to be slightly different, with MLS team actually entering a round earlier. Well, actually, not. Let me just kind of clarify this. Not every single MLS team is going to go around early in the US Open Cup. I believe 8 team in MLS is actually going to be entering a round later, but majority of the team and the 17 out of the 25 team that is eligible to be in the US Open Cup is going to be participating in this tournament in the third round. And I think it's a good idea, the fact that MLS team does enter the third round or enter a round early in this format, because one of the thing that I always like to see in the US Open Cup with MLS team is that they get to face these lower opponent like teams from the USL Championship, or even if there is that one case where there's these local team that is way down in the division, like MPSL or even UPSL team, that once in a blue moon able to face an MLS team. That is always a matchup that I love to see. I mean, it's almost a classic David versus Goliath kind of matchup. And even though most time the MLS team is able to win that matchup, you never know. I mean, it's always great to see, and it's definitely does bring some recognition to some of these lower league team where you're a team that probably nobody knows, but when you do get a chance to play against these bigger team and more well-known team, you're going to definitely receive some fandom from the rest of the soccer landscape in the US. So yeah, I do like the fact that MLS team does enter around early. I mean, I know some MLS team and some fans don't like it because that means it's going to be an extra game in the middle of the week, but this is also why when you look at the schedule that's been released this season, there's going to be less midweek games. That's going to be happening in MLS. And I think that's for the best because midweek games usually don't draw very good attendance. And also, for me, it's an absolute hassle for me to try to keep track of midweek games because, I have to work during the middle of the week. I don't really always have time to just straight away go home and basically watch these midweek games. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people, and especially some of those few one that is kind of like me, a true diehard MLS fans wants to watch every single games, they'll be left frustrated the fact that, I have to get off work at around 5:30, but already there's games that's been happening at 4:30. Well, at least if you're a diehard MLS fans that live on the West Coast, I mean, that's always going to be a tough thing. But even if you're living in the East Coast, it could be tough too with the way that you have to stay up like 10:30 to watch these games, and especially if you root for a team and you have to watch them play against a West Coast team in the middle of the week at 10:30. That is a really hard thing to do, especially if you have to go to work the very next day very early. But yeah, at least I think that's a good benefit, and the fact that there is U.S. Open Cup game that kind of take place of these MLS game that usually happen in the midweek. I'm all for it as long as these U.S. Open Cup game are not just kind of these MLS versus MLS kind of matchup. But either way, that is pretty much it for what is considered probably the longest news of the week that I've done so far on my channel. I mean, I haven't really kept track of it because I've done hundreds of news of the week, but there's no doubt this has got to be one of the longest one and probably the most topic that I've talked about because, since I didn't do a news of the week on Saturday, this is almost a combination of that video and then this video combined, and it just basically jumbled in a long video. But if you did enjoy it, let me know in the comments below, and also if there's any news I didn't put here on the board, and I'm pretty sure I missed at least one or two players that will sign off of free agency, because like I said, there's a lot of players that sign off of free agency. Let me know in the comments below also. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.